The ruins were quiet now. The only sounds were the faint breaths of the mother, the soft rustle of the boy shifting beside her, and the distant whistle of wind cutting through broken walls. The narrator sat with them, silent, the half-empty pack. At his side, he had shared food, he had offered water, but he knew this was not enough. Tomorrow, hunger would return. Tomorrow, sickness would still burn in the mother's body. Tomorrow, this boy would still be alone, fighting a battle he could not win. He stared at the boy's eyes, large, glowing faintly in the dark. Those eyes held too much for a child: fear, courage, pain, and the stubborn will to keep his mother alive. The narrator's own thoughts twisted like a storm. I have done something. But is something enough? Do I walk away now, saying I tried? Or do I stay and let their fight become mine? His heart knew the answer before his mind could argue. He looked down at his pack again. He could keep it for himself, save his strength, survive longer. But what kind of survival would that be? Walking away from the boy's desperate face, from the mother's fading breath, knowing he could have done more. He exhaled slowly. The choice was no longer about food. It was about who he wanted to be. The boy shifted closer to his mother, pressing his forehead against her shoulder. His small hands clutched her arm, as if he feared she might vanish if he let go. The narrator finally spoke, his voice low, steady. I will not leave you. The boy looked up, confused. He did not understand the words, but he felt the tone. His glowing eyes blinked, wide, questioning. The narrator repeated, slower, firmer. He tapped his chest, then pointed to them both. Together. The boy's lips parted. His mother's weak eyes opened, and for the first time, she looked at him not only with gratitude, but with something else. Trust. The narrator pulled more from his parka small blanket. Worn but warm. He placed it over them. The boy touched the fabric with careful hands, surprised by the gift. He pressed it around his mother tightly, making sure she was warm first before pulling it over himself. The narrator watched, and a faint smile touched his lips. Always her before himself, even starving, even scared. He leaned back against the cold stone, but inside he felt warmth he had not known in years. A bond had been made, and with it, a duty. But the weight of it pressed on him too. If I help them, I must find food. I must find medicine. I must risk being seen helping an alien family. The colony will not forgive me. They will call it betrayal. The thought burned, but he did not flinch from it. The boy's eyes found him again. For the first time, the fear inside them dimmed. They were still cautious, still guarded, but there was something new there too. A question. A hope. The narrator's chest tightened. He nodded once, firm. I'll find a way, he whispered. The boy tilted his head, not understanding the words, but something in his face softened. The mother closed her eyes again, her breathing calm now, as if the blanket and the water had given her a little peace. The boy leaned against her side, his hand still gripping hers. Slowly, his eyes closed too, exhaustion finally winning over fear. The narrator stayed awake. He listened to the ruins, to the night beyond them. His eyes scanned the shadows, his hand resting near his weapon, not for the boy. Not for the mother, but for anyone who might try to harm them. They were not his blood. They were not his people, but in that moment, they were his responsibility. As the night stretched on, his thoughts returned to the colony. To the hungry, to the broken, to the forgotten. If one boy and one mother lived like this, how many others hid in the dark? How many more cried silently, too weak to steal, too weak to survive? The choice he had made tonight was only the beginning. He could save them. But what if saving them meant facing the entire colony? What if his act of mercy grew into a battle far larger than he imagined? His heart gave the answer again. Firm and unshaken. Then let it grow. The ruins groaned around him. The wind carried the echoes of a broken world. And yet inside that shelter, something new was born. Not just survival, not just mercy, but a bond. That could change everything. The narrator looked at the sleeping boy, at the fragile mother, and whispered into the night, "This is not the end. This is the start." The shadows gave no reply, but the silence felt different now, not empty. Full of a promise, full of a fire that could not be put out. And so, amid the cold ruins of a dying world, a human made his choice to stand. To protect, to fight not for himself, but for them. And in that decision, the future shifted. The pack lay between them like a silent test. The boy's thin fingers hovered over it, shaking, ready to pull back at the slightest sign of danger. His large eyes burned with fear, but also with need. Hunger fought against mistrust in his young. Heart. The mother coughed again, harder this time. Her whole body bent with the force of it, and for a moment the narrator thought she would stop breathing. The boy panicked. He pressed his small hands against her chest, whispering in his broken voice, trying to calm her. The narrator's own chest tightened. Watching them suffer was like watching a flame flicker in the wind, ready to die. He had lived through battles, through hunger, through nights when silence itself felt like a predator. But this was something he had no weapon against. Still, he did have one choice. He stood slowly, raising both hands to show he carried no harm. The boy's gaze sharpened, every muscle in his frail body ready to spring. He clutched his mother tighter, his lips curled in a soundless warning. The narrator knelt again, moving low, making himself smaller. His voice came soft, steady, careful. "I'm not your enemy." The boy's eyes narrowed. His breathing was fast and shallow. His little shoulders rose and fell quickly. But he did not move from his mother's side. The narrator pulled out a piece of bread from the pack and placed it gently on the ground. Then he opened his flask and set it beside the bread. Slowly, he pushed both toward the boy. "Food, water," he said, tapping the flask. "For her, for you." The boy's glowing eyes darted from the bread to the stranger, then back to his mother. His lips trembled. He wanted it. He needed it. But his fear was stronger. The mother stirred weakly, her gaze lifting toward the stranger. Her eyes glowed. Faintly, tired but searching. She whispered something in her alien tongue. The boy turned to her, listening. She touched his cheek, her hand trembling, and nodded faintly. Permission. The boy hesitated, then reached out. His thin fingers brushed the bread. He pulled it back quickly, clutching it to his chest like treasure. He grabbed the flask next, holding it with both hands, as if it were the most valuable thing in the world. He pressed it to his mother's lips first. Carefully, he tilted it, letting only a few drops slide into her mouth. She swallowed with difficulty. But color returned faintly to her face. The narrator let out a breath. He hadn't known he was holding. The boy gave her a piece of bread next. She chewed slowly, weakly, but she ate. The boy's lips curved into the smallest smile, though tears still clung to his eyes. The narrator felt something shift inside him. Until now, he had been a watcher, a follower, a shadow in their struggle. But now, he had crossed the line. He was part of it. He sat back, watching quietly as they ate. The boy glanced at him often, suspicion still in his eyes, but the look was changing. No longer pure fear. Something else was there now: confusion, curiosity. The beginning of fragile trust. The mother's gaze lingered on the stranger longer. She studied him as if weighing his soul. Her lips moved, and though the words were faint, The tone carried gratitude. The narrator nodded once, slowly. "You're welcome," he said softly, though he doubted they understood. Some things did not need translation. For a long moment, silence held them together. The wind outside howled, the ruins creaked, but inside that broken shelter, something new was born, a thin thread, fragile as glass, tying 3 lives together. Yet the narrator's thoughts twisted. What now? Do I walk away? Do I leave them with food for one night, only to die another day? Or do I stay? If I stay, what am I agreeing to? One family? Or 1,000 like them? The decision pressed down on him like a mountain. He had enough for himself if he was careful. But if he gave more, if he kept helping, it would change everything. The boy sat close to his mother now, feeding her small bites. His eyes, still wary, lifted again to the narrator. And this time, there was no hatred, only a question. Would this stranger stay, or would he leave? The narrator looked at the boy, then at the woman, then down at his half-empty pack. His jaw tightened. The answer formed in his heart before his mind could argue. He could not walk away, not from them, not from this truth. His voice came low, almost to himself, but firm enough to cut through the silence. "I'll help you." The boy blinked, confused. The mother's eyes softened again, glowing faintly with something rare hope. And in that ruined shelter, with nothing but hunger and weakness around them, the narrator made his choice. The decision was not about food. It was about life, and once made, there was no turning back. The mother leaned back against the broken wall, her breathing still heavy, but steadier than before. Drops of water glistened on her lips. The boy sat close beside her, holding the bread like a sacred treasure. His eyes never left the stranger. Suspicion still lived there, but it no longer burned as sharp as before. The narrator stayed kneeling, keeping his hands visible, his voice low. He did not move closer. He knew trust was like fragile glass. Once broken, it could never be repaired. The boy's thin fingers tore the bread slowly. He chewed tiny bites, careful, as though afraid each piece might vanish if eaten too fast. Yet when his mother reached weakly for more, he pushed his share toward her without hesitation. The narrator's heart stirred again. Even starving, he gives her more than he keeps for himself. The woman's glowing eyes drifted back to the stranger. She spoke something in her broken voice, a word that echoed soft, almost like thank. The narrator could not be sure, but the meaning was clear. Gratitude, he nodded slowly. You don't need words, I understand. The boy tilted his head at the sound of the voice, studying the man. His breathing calmed. His grip on the food loosened slightly. He whispered something to his mother, his tone curious this time. Not only fearful. She answered with effort, her hand brushing his cheek again. A simple touch, but full of meaning. The narrator decided to risk more. He reached into his pack once again and pulled out a piece of dried fruit. He held it out, palm open, not pushing, just offering. The boy's eyes locked onto it. Hunger pulled at him, but mistrust held him back. Slowly, step by step, he crawled closer. His mother watched with weak eyes, her gaze flicking between the stranger's face and her son's hands. The boy reached out, snatched the fruit quickly, then darted back to his mother's side. His small body trembled, but this time he did not run. Instead, he split the fruit into 2 pieces. One he gave to her. The other he chewed with small, careful bites. The narrator smiled faintly. Even now, he shares everything. The moment shifted. The air inside the ruin felt less heavy. Still broken, still cold, but touched by something warmer. Something like trust beginning to grow. The narrator lowered himself to the ground, sitting cross-legged. He spoke softly, half to himself, half to them. You fight for each other. That is strength. That is worth saving. Of course, they could not understand his words. But tone, expression, the calm in his eyes, they understood enough. The boy's gaze softened. His small shoulders no longer shook as much. He studied the man not like an enemy now, but like a puzzle. The mother coughed again, though weaker than before. Her eyes closed briefly. The boy panicked, touching her arm, whispering quickly. She breathed slowly, then opened her eyes again, faint but alive. Relief washed across the child's face. The narrator watched, silent, struck by the raw bond between them. Mother and son broken by hunger, yet unbroken in love. He thought back to his own people. 2 families torn apart by war. 2 children left crying in empty homes. 2 mothers who gave their last breath so their children might see another sunrise. 4. The first time in years, he felt his chest ache, not with fear, not with anger, but with something gentler. Respect, connection. The boy looked at him again. His lips moved. The word was soft, strange, but it carried weight. A name, perhaps? His name. The narrator pointed at himself. Human, he said slowly. Then he pointed at the boy, waiting. The boy blinked, then touched his own chest, speaking. A short, broken word. His name. The sound was strange, not easy for human tongue, but the narrator repeated it, careful, respectful. The boy's eyes widened with surprise. Then, for the first time, his lips curved not into fear, not into warning, but into the beginning of a smile. The bond deepened. The narrator leaned back against the wall, feeling the weight of the ruins around them. But for the first time, it did not feel like a tomb. It felt like shelter. He had walked into this place chasing stolen food. He had found something else, instead something worth more than supplies. The mother's eyes closed again, resting. The boy stayed awake, his small hand resting over hers, his other hand holding the last crumbs of bread. He watched the stranger with wary eyes, but no longer sharp with hatred. They were softer now, open, cautious, but curious. The narrator whispered, almost to himself, "We are not so different." The boy tilted his head, not understanding the words, but sensing the meaning. Outside, the night raged on. The wind tore at the ruins. The colony slept unaware. But inside this broken place, 3 lives sat together, human and alien. Strangers bound not by blood, not by language, but by survival and something even stronger. Trust beginning to take root. The bond was fragile, the future uncertain. But in that moment, the narrator knew. This was no accident. Their paths had crossed for a reason, and he also knew this bond was only the beginning. The child knelt by the figure on the floor, his thin arms shaking as he tried to push the bread into her hands. The alien woman, his mother, looked so weak that even opening her eyes seemed like a heavy task. The ruins were cold, but her body trembled with fever. The narrator watched from the shadows, breath held. The place around them was broken walls half fallen, roof gone, dust covering everything but in that corner. Under a torn blanket, life still clung on. Barely the child whispered, voice small, broken, carrying fear and love at the same time. His strange tongue echoed softly, but the meaning was not hard to understand. He wanted her to eat. He wanted her to live. The mother coughed again, a sound that cracked the silence. She pushed the bread back into his hands, weak but firm. Message was clear. No, my son, you eat. You must survive. The boy shook his head, tears glistening in his big eyes. He pressed the bread to her lips, refusing to take even a bite. His voice cracked, desperate, pleading. The narrator's chest tightened. This was not what he expected when the food was stolen. He had imagined a greedy thief, maybe a gang of aliens hiding in the dark. But this This was hunger, pain, and love stronger than fear. The boy finally broke the bread in half. He forced one piece into his mother's hand and kept the other in his own. But even then, he raised his hand, offering his piece to her again. The woman's eyes softened, glowing faintly with sorrow. She placed her hand on his cheek, a mother's gesture that needed no language. She accepted only a small bite, as if even eating too much would be stealing from her son. The narrator could not look away. His heart felt heavy. He had seen soldiers fight. He had seen men kill for less than this. But here, in the ruins, was something far more powerful: the fight to stay alive. Not for oneself, but for someone else. He leaned against the cold wall, thoughts racing. Should I step forward now? Offer more food? Offer water? But what if they fear me? What if they run? What if they believe I will harm them? The boy was alert, his large eyes scanning the shadows even while caring for his mother. Fear lived inside him like a shadow. If the narrator moved too soon, the child might run, and the sick woman would be left alone. The narrator stayed hidden, listening, watching, feeling the weight of the moment. Outside, the wind howled through the broken city. Rusted metal creaked, dust swirled in the air, but inside this ruined shelter, only two things mattered: a child's stubborn love and a mother's fading strength. The boy finally sat close to her, his body pressed against hers, to keep her warm. His piece of bread lay untouched on his lap. His eyes closed for a moment, but his arms held tightly to the food. As if letting go meant death, the narrator could see every detail, now the bones showing under the skin. The cuts on the boy's hands, the way the mother's breathing struggled with each rise and fall of her chest. It was no longer a question of survival. It was a question of how long could they last like this. And in that thought, a new fear entered the narrator's mind. If there is one starving family here, how many more are hiding in these ruins? How many more are coughing, starving, waiting for food that will never come? The silence inside grew heavy. The narrator felt like an intruder in a sacred moment, watching love and suffering blend into one picture that words could not describe. He looked down at his own pack. It was lighter now, missing what the boy had stolen, but still carried some food and water. His hand rested on it. The choice pressed hard on his chest. Should he give it? Should he step into their lives? The boy shifted suddenly, his eyes catching the faintest sound. He looked straight toward the shadows where the narrator stood. The narrator's breath froze. The boy's eyes widened, fear burning bright. He hugged his mother tightly, as if to protect her. His body shook, but he faced the dark bravely. Like a small animal ready to fight for its family, the narrator stepped back slowly, his boots scraping against stone. The sound was small, but in the silence it felt like thunder. The mother opened her eyes halfway. Weak though she was, her gaze turned toward the same shadow. Her lips moved, whispering something soft, a word the narrator could not understand. The boy whispered back, his voice trembling, desperate. His eyes stayed locked on the dark. The narrator felt the moment breaking apart. He had been seen. The secret was no longer hidden. He stood there, torn between two choices: step forward and reveal himself, or vanish into the night, leaving the boy and his mother to their fate. The child's eyes, wide and glowing, begged Anne, "Answer." And for the first time, the narrator realized this hidden place was not just theirs. It had become his, to that the boy's wide eyes did not blink. He held his mother tighter, his thin body trembling. His small frame shook with both fear and exhaustion. Yet his arms wrapped around her as if he could shield her from the world. The narrator stood frozen in the shadows. His heart pounded, each beat louder than the howl of the wind outside. He had followed out of anger, then curiosity, But now he stood before something far heavier. The mother coughed again. The sound was deep, raw, and painful. Each breath seemed to cut her lungs. Her hand trembled as she reached for the bread her son had forced upon her. She lifted it slowly, weakly, but her hand shook so much that it almost slipped from her grasp. The boy caught it quickly and pressed it back into her palm. He whispered something urgent, his words broken, his voice filled with fear. Even without knowing the alien tongue, the narrator understood. "Please, mother, eat, please. Don't leave me." The woman's glowing eyes softened. She shook her head faintly and pushed the bread back at him. She wanted him to survive. The narrator's throat tightened. He had seen soldiers give their lives for comrades, but this was deeper. It was not about war, not about pride, not about victory. It was about love that would rather starve than let a child go hungry. The boy pressed the food harder against her lips. His hands shook. Tears welled in his eyes, but did not fall. He begged her, his voice rising, cracking. He wanted her to live more than he wanted anything for himself. She took a small bite, only enough to calm him, then placed the rest back in his hands. Her breathing grew heavier after even that tiny effort. Her chest rose and fell like a fire, burning its last sparks. The narrator felt a weight crush his chest. He looked down at his own pack. Inside, there was still bread, some dried meat, and a flask of water. Enough for a day or two. Enough to matter. But a battle raged inside him. If I give it, I will have less. Food is rare. What if I need it later? But if I don't, his child will watch his mother die. The thought gnawed at him. He had always believed survival meant holding on to what was his. But now he questioned if survival meant something else, something bigger than himself. The boy shifted, hugging his mother again, as if his small warmth could fight the sickness eating her body. His thin shoulders shook, his lips pressed against her forehead, whispering promises. Promises he might not be able to keep. The narrator's heart ached. He remembered moments from his own lifetimes when he had been weak, times when someone else's hand had lifted him. He remembered hunger, though never this deep. He remembered fear, though never this sharp. The ruins around them felt heavier now. The cracked walls leaned like silent witnesses. The broken city was full of ghosts. But in this moment, only two lives mattered, and the choice of one man watching them. The mother's cough grew worse. She turned her head away, struggling for air. The boy panicked. He pressed the bread to her lips again, then pulled her up slightly, trying to help her breathe. His small hands were clumsy, desperate, but filled with love. The narrator stepped forward without meaning to. His boots scraped stone. The sound echoed, the boy's head snapped up. His glowing eyes locked on the shadow where the narrator stood. Fear flared. He wrapped his arms tighter around his mother, pulling her close like a shield. His lips pulled back, baring small teeth in a gesture that was not anger, but warning. The narrator froze. He lifted his hands slowly, showing they were empty. His voice, quiet but steady, filled the ruined room. "I won't hurt you." The boy stiffened, not moving, not trusting. His chest rose and fell fast, his small body a wall of fragile courage. The narrator knelt down, lowering himself, making himself smaller. He slid his pack forward an inch. The boy's eyes flicked to it, then back to him. Food, water, a chance. The mother's eyes opened halfway. Weak though she was, she looked at him. Not with hatred, not even with fear, but with something softer, something that almost looked like hope. The narrator swallowed hard. He pushed the pack closer. "You need this more than I do," he said softly. The boy's arms tightened around his mother. He hesitated. His eyes glowed with suspicion, fear, and longing all at once. The narrator held still. He did not move closer. He did not rush. He simply waited. The boy's small hand finally reached out. Slowly. Shaking, he touched the edge of the pack, then pulled it back quickly, as if afraid it would burn him. The narrator smiled faintly, not with joy, but with relief. The struggle was not just theirs anymore, it was his too. And in that silent ruin, one truth burned brighter than the cold night outside. Survival was not about keeping food in your hands. It was about keeping life alive, even if it was not your own. The night was quiet on the colony's edge. The streets were dark, broken lights flickered, and the air carried a strange smell of dust and metal. The narrator walked alone, holding a small pack of food close. The colony was dangerous after sunset. Shadows moved, and not all shadows belonged to humans. He had just returned from trade. The food in his pack was not much, just bread, dried fruit, and some water, but in these hard times, every piece of food was precious. He looked around, hearing only the wind against the ruined buildings, and then it happened. Something quick brushed past him. He felt a pull at his arm. His pack grew lighter. Before he could react, a small figure dashed away into the dark. His heart jumped. He had been robbed at first. Anger rose in him. Who dared to steal from him in this dangerous place? He looked harder into the dark street. The thief was fast, but not fast enough to vanish. A small shadow, thin legs, small hands clutching the pack, ran clumsily ahead. It was not a soldier. It was not a gang member. It was not a man at all. It was a child. The narrator's anger turned into surprise. A child. Out here, alone, stealing food. The figure was small, thin, and moved with a strange limp. The light of a broken street lamp fell on the child for only a second, and the narrator saw his face. It was not human. The skin was pale gray, almost glowing under the faint light. The head was too large for the thin body. The eyes, big, round, and shining with fear, looked back once before disappearing into the shadows again. An alien child. The narrator froze. His first thought was danger. Many in the colony feared aliens. Some hated them. The war between species had left deep scars. But what was an alien child doing here? Alone, starving, desperate enough to steal a small pack of food. His curiosity burned stronger than his anger. He could chase. He could let it go. But something inside told him this was not just a simple theft. He decided to follow. The chase was quiet, but tense. The child ran into the deeper part of the ruins, places most people avoided at night. Old walls, broken wires, and shattered glass made the path dangerous. The narrator stepped carefully, making sure not to lose sight. The child looked back often. Eyes wide, breathing hard. Fear was clear. He was not stealing for greed. He was stealing because he had no choice. The narrator's thoughts raced. Why would a child risk so much for food? Where was he going? Was someone waiting for him? Or was this just a trick to lead me into danger? Every step raised more questions. The child turned a corner and almost fell, but held on to the bag tightly. He hugged it to his chest like it was treasure. His thin arms shook under the weight. His body looked weak, fragile, close to breaking. The narrator slowed his steps, keeping a safe distance. His heart beat fast. The night felt heavier, as if the shadows themselves wanted to swallow the secret he was chasing. He wondered again, what if it is a trap? But deep down, the image of that starving child pulling food from his hand stayed in his mind. It was not the face of a thief. It was the face of hunger. It was the face of survival. The wind grew stronger. Broken signs creaked above. The smell of rust and smoke filled the air. The narrator adjusted his coat and kept moving. The child slipped between two collapsed buildings, crawling through a narrow gap. The narrator hesitated. Should he enter? His food was gone, but more than food was at stake now. Curiosity pushed him forward. He bent low, squeezing through the same gap. Dust fell on his shoulders. His hand scraped against the rough stone. But he pressed on. On the other side, the place was darker, almost silent. The child was gone for a moment. The narrator's eyes searched, his ears sharp. Then he heard it. A cough, weak, dry. Painful, the sound came from deeper inside. The child's shadow moved again, smaller now, as if he had slowed down. The narrator's heart tightened. Who was coughing? Who else was here? He crouched low, moving carefully, step by step. The child's voice broke the silence. Soft, trembling, speaking in words not fully human, but the meaning was clear. He was calling to someone. The narrator stayed hidden, but his eyes widened as the truth began to form in his mind. The child was not running to escape. He was running to someone. Someone who waited in the dark. Someone weak. Someone in need. The pack of food was not for himself. The narrator's breath slowed. Suspense filled the air around him. He was about to discover a truth that would change everything he thought about enemies, about survival, and about mercy. And so, he followed deeper. Into the shadows, the child slipped deeper into the ruins, clutching the stolen food against his chest. His thin legs moved fast, but his body was weak. Each step looked like it might be his last. Still, fear gave him strength. He could not lose what he had taken. He could not fail. The narrator followed quietly, his boots pressing against broken stones. The sound echoed, but the wind and rattling metal covered it. He kept his distance. Too close, and the child might run even faster. Too far, and he might lose him forever. The ruins felt alive at night. Shadows moved where no one stood. Broken glass reflected the faint moonlight, creating false glimmers. Every corner seemed dangerous. The narrator knew this place was avoided. For a reason. Many who entered these alleys after dark never returned. Still, he pressed on. His curiosity was stronger than his fear. The child stumbled once, falling to his knees. The bag almost slipped from his arms. A sharp cry escaped his mouth, a sound too small, too fragile for this harsh world. He looked back in panic, eyes glowing faintly in the dark. The narrator froze, staying in the shadows. Their eyes met for only a second. The child's face was thin, almost skeletal. His skin stretched tight over sharp bones. His lips trembled, but he said nothing. Fear burned in his large, round eyes. Then, without a word, he pushed himself up and limped forward again. The narrator exhaled slowly. That single look said everything. This was not a trick. This was desperation. The path twisted deeper into the ruins. Walls rose high on both sides, cracked and leaning as if ready to fall. Old wires dangled like black vines. The air grew colder, heavier. The smell of rust mixed with something else, something rotten, something sick. The narrator's chest tightened. He wondered again, why here? Why would a child hide in a place so broken, so dead? The child slowed his pace now. His steps were smaller, careful. He hugged the bag tightly, as if it were his heart. He turned left, then right, moving through paths that seemed random, but there was purpose. He knew these ruins well. He was leading. The way home. The narrator stayed behind, moving silently. His thoughts raced. What if others are waiting? What if this is not just a child, but a camp of aliens? What if I walk into danger? Yet another thought pressed harder. What if I walk into truth? The chase was no longer about food. It was about answers. Suddenly, the child stopped. He crouched low, peering into the darkness ahead. He looked left, then right, like a small animal checking for hunters. Then he darted forward into a collapsed building. The narrator followed. Inside, the air was damp. The roof had fallen long ago, leaving only twisted beams and shattered stone. The child moved fast through the wreckage, slipping through holes too small for grown men. But the narrator was careful, steady, finding larger gaps. His heart beat faster. His body moved without thought. He was a hunter, but not for prey. He was a seeker, chasing a mystery. He heard the child again, small breaths, quick, nervous. Then came a voice. Not his, it was weak. A whisper, a cough, broken sound that carried pain. The narrator froze. His ears sharpened. The child's steps grew slower now, softer. He was no longer running to escape. He was running toward someone. The cough came again. This time longer, harsher, echoing through the ruin. The narrator's breath caught. His mind filled with questions. Who was it? Another child? An elder? Was this the reason for the theft? He moved closer, careful not to reveal himself. His hands brushed against cold stone. Dust clung to his skin. The silence between sounds felt heavier than the ruins themselves. Finally, he saw it. The child knelt down beside a figure lying on the ground, covered with a torn blanket. The figure was larger, but thin, weak, shaking with every breath. The cough returned, deep and painful. Tearing through the silence like a wound, the narrator's eyes widened. It was a woman, an alien woman. The child's mother. She turned her head slowly, her eyes half closed, glowing faintly with the same strange light as the child's. Her lips cracked as she tried to speak. The child pressed the stolen food into her hands, whispering words in a broken voice. The narrator could not hear the exact words, but the meaning was clear. He had stolen not for himself. He had stolen for her. The mother's hand shook as she touched the food. Her voice was weak, almost gone, but it carried love. She pushed the bread back to the child, telling him to eat instead. The boy refused. Tears shone in his large eyes. He pressed the food to her chest, begging her to take it. The narrator felt his throat tighten. This was not the face of enemies. This was not the image of a thief. This was family, broken by hunger, yet still fighting to stay alive. The ruins. Around them were silent, but inside, the narrator's heart roared with conflict. Should he step forward now? Should he help? Or should he turn back before he was seen? He stood in the shadows, hidden, trembling between choice and fate. And in that, the moment he realized this was no chase. This was the beginning of something far greater.